Hello, Gnashing of Teeth, episode one. I'm Casey.
I'm Milo. Yeah, we wanted to start the podcast mainly because of the lack of general occult content in the space right now. And there's not a lot of podcasts where you can get informable information about the occult while also having like a genuine like conversation with somebody.
Yeah, and so back in the day, it was really hard to get into it because you had to go find all the books. There was no
Mhm.
internet and there was nothing like that. So now that there's internet and you can order the books, you can find the books, you can read up on the authors, and it really is out there for everyone to study and to learn. And so one of the cool things is how people get into it, how they get turned on by it. And some people, they just love big collections. Other people want to learn. Other people want to do the practice, like the actual rituals and
Right,
things like that. So I
right.
guess what I'd like to know, and it's a really cool story, is like, how did you ever get into like as deep as you are? What was the first couple things that got you into, the left hand path?
Right. Okay, so it was a couple years ago. We had a conversation, and I was a Christian at the time.
You and I
And
had
you,
the conversation. Okay.
yeah, I was a Christian at the time, and I was talking to you about the Bible
Mhm.
and what I believed, and you said, that's good. The Bible's good. Jesus is good,
Yep. Good book.
but don't just read one book and proclaim it's 100% truth.
Agree.
And I thought, okay, whatever. I didn't really think much of it at the time. And, that night, actually, I was really thinking about it. I started questioning it. And I was like, is he talking about, should I read like other religious texts, like, the Quran, right? And eventually I was like, well, I know God's side of the story, right? The Bible, right? But what about Lucifer and these fallen angels, apparently, right? And that's what I called them at the time because, I have the preconceived Christian notion on everything, right? If
Mhm.
it's not God or Jesus, everything else is, demon, right?
Right.
So I started getting books on demonology, and that kind of led me into the occult narrative. So you could think about, the complete book of Demonolatry by S. Connolly, or
Yeah, that's one of your
the
favorites, I
book
know.
of Yeah, the book of Saint Cyprian by Jose Lieto, I think.
It's great too. Yeah.
And those were, major shifting points in my, I guess you could say, occult research journey. And when you earlier when you said, some people get into it to practice, some people just want to build a collection. When I started, I was what they call an armchair theorist for quite a while, where I'd read the books, but then I'd put it back on the shelf and I'd be like, on to the next one. I never really applied anything. And it wasn't until relatively recently that I started doing that. So,
Cool thing about Saint Cyprian, I don't know if it's in the book or if I read it somewhere else, but it's a great book. And they said
mhm,
that he was actually really into the black magic thing and really into
mhm,
dark arts. And then he got converted. That's why he's a saint. And the church had asked him, if you create a book of all the black magic and then that'll be your
mhm,
way of like repenting or whatever. So
right.
he was
Mhm,
actually like very much in the Christian movement when he wrote that.
mhm,
So it's a really interesting twist if you
right.
read it that way. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what about you? How did you get onto this path?
Yeah. So interesting enough, I was always kind of like I was always intrigued with like dark things. So I mean, even as a kid, I would go inside and tell my mom and dad that there's a devil in the bushes. And it seemed like at nighttime, I felt more alive. I always rooted for the villain. In Star Wars, I root for the Sith. I like scary movies. Halloween's my favorite, holiday. And so I always just felt like, not that I'm a bad guy, I always felt like I was on the darker side of things, you know?
Right.
And so I love books, and I would always go to like the murder books and the occult books and the horror books. And that's just kind of, they're all kind of lumped together there in the library or in the bookstore, right?
Hmm.
And I kept passing that Necronomicon book. And I'd always open it up. And this was that 1977 Simon version. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And which which there's an occultist named Alan Cabal or Cable, and he thinks that I don't know if I'm breaking this guy's chops, but they think Simon is actually Peter Levenda. Not sure who Peter Levenda is. I'm sure he doesn't want me talking about it. He probably wants to remain solo. But that's kind of that's the myth of that, you know, because no one knows who the Simon is.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so I would always go and find that book, and I'd read it and never buy it. And finally,
Hmm.
I was reading stuff I really enjoyed, and so I just bought it. And so then I read it. And the one thing that really stood out to me, there's a piece in there called "The Testimony of the Mad Arab." And the Testimony of the Mad Arab is like Al Hazred, and the whole time he's in like Damascus, you know, 200 AD or something, and he's talking about he's old, he's this old sorcerer, and you know, he's on his deathbed, and he can feel the demons ready to rip him apart, you know. And then he would stop, and he would beg these entities for help. So he would say, Anu, 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 save my soul. He would say, Enki, 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 please help me. And then he's the one that
Hmm.
said, you have to reach out to the gods because they're very forgetful and they're very far away. So it just intrigued me. And so I just kind of parked the book. And then,
Yeah.
oddly enough, years later, like years and years later, I started getting into the Sumerian tablets and Zechariah Sitchin in his, you know, translation called the Earth Chronicles. And I
Hmm.
started reading these names again. Here's Anu, here's Inky. And so if, oh, he's a professor like in Israel, reading a stone in Iraq, and
Right.
it's already, you know, lining up with, you know, a dark book over here in the Americas.
Hmm.
And so instantly I was like, wow, how did those two things connect? Right? That's
Right. Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah.
I think nowadays, if you get to Necronomicon, I think Peter Simon in the beginning now, there's like a, I don't know what you call it, an epilogue or whatever, where they actually
Hmm.
talk about it comes from the Sumerian. A lot of that Necronomicon comes from the Sumerian stuff. I had to figure out the hard way, but I think now they say it in the actual book. So pretty
Right.
cool. And so then
Yeah.
I was like, wow, there's something tangible here. And so that's when I
Mhm.
started, you know, I would go back to that same section, and there would be a new book, and I'd buy it.
Mhm.
And then just kind of got, I was into the Necronomicon. So any Necronomicon that came out, like even Donald Tyson has a couple, bought those. You know,
Right.
if
Hmm.
one comes out, I'm just buying it and reading it. And those are pretty awesome. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I, you know, ultimately got into it, you know.
Yeah. What made you curious about the Sumerian tablets? Like, how did you come upon those?
It's so it started to just answer things for me. So the perfect story for it, and I'm sure other people have told this, was like Noah's Ark. So
Hmm.
I'm not trying to put down the Bible any way, shape, or form. Great book.
Right.
But so the Lord comes down to me, I'm Noah, and he says, hey, you have a certain amount of time, build this ark. You got to get the male and female of everything on earth on this boat. And so, you know, he comes down 7 days later and says, how you doing, Casey? And I said, well, I got some wood and I
Hmm.
tried to get a rhino, and you can see I'm missing an arm. That was hard to get the rhino. You know, I'm just
Right.
tackling him in my
Yeah.
robe and sandals.
Right. Yeah.
And so it just didn't make any sense to me.
Right.
But then the Sumerian tablets come out, and they're like, no, here's the real story. And you have to understand that this is like the first civilization, like with alphabet, right?
Yeah.
And they're putting it on, you know, tablets. This stuff can't be translated wrong. It is what it is. Uh, well, I guess it can be translated wrong, but it can't change from what it is. Like if you and I went and
Right.
looked at it, it's the same thing that they looked at it back then.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they were saying, it never rained for 40 days, 40 nights. A piece of Antarctica fell in and it raised the ocean levels, and that's how the Earth got flooded. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know the Sumerian name off the top of my head. It starts with a Z. Uh, Ziahudra or Zia. I'd have to look it up. Um,
Mhm.
but ultimately, Enki tells his grandson, "There's going to be a flood. I need you to get the DNA of every male and female, there is." And so now your boat's real small, and you have all
Yeah.
these little test tubes. So it's real easy to do that now. So
Yeah.
that's what the Sumerian tablets did for me. It made the unbelievable now seem believable, right? And so
Yeah.
that's what connected me. So if it wasn't for that, I would have never went back and grabbed that Necronomicon and reread the Anu and Inky stuff, right?
Right. Hmm.
Alhazred or Simon or Peter, they knew about this. Don't know how,
Mm.
but they did, and pretty epic, the
Yeah.
whole Anunnaki thing. There's actually another guy who's connected it together too. His name's Joshua Free. He's got a website and he's got a couple books, and he's got a book called the Necronomicon. It's the Anunnaki Bible, which is pretty
Mm.
sweet because it's kind of where I was headed. I was like, man, these two things are connected somehow, and he fell on it that way too. So check that guy out. He's pretty cool. He's got some good stuff.
Nice.
Neat. Yeah, it was neat to stumble on that. Yeah. You ever how far do you like talk about it with other people? You ever say anything to other people, or you just kind of keep it in?
Yeah, that's hard. Most people brush it off or they don't like pay much attention to it. Everybody's kind of dialed into life. And, when you talk about spiritual or things that you could even deem as conspiracy almost, a lot of people like to brush it off. So I mainly keep it to myself. Maybe here and there, if somebody talks about the Bible or religion, I'll chime in. But other than that, it's very small.
Yeah, I normally just throw little tidbits. If someone's like saying something and trying to teach me
Yeah.
something, I listen and I don't cut them off or anything, and I just say, hey, you should check this out. You should read this if you have time. If you don't, it's cool, whatever. You know,
Right.
there's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with someone's belief and what they believe in, and I think it's great. But there's just a lot more out there to learn. You know,
for sure. Yeah.
the um the Necronomicon has really taken off. Like, I mean, I don't even know how many versions there are anymore. I mean, it seems like there's one coming out every couple of
Yeah.
years, which is it's super cool. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know if Donald Tyson has one. I bought two of his. One was the 13 Gates of the Necronomicon. Another one, I think it's just called Necronomicon, and it is just
Mhm.
an amazing read all the way through. I mean, just the guy's in Iram and he's eating the white spiders and he's trying to go through this thing, and it's just really epic, just really really well done. I think I read it in a night.
Yeah.
I was just
It's
I was,
become it's become quite the standard, it seems like, in the occult. If your top five books or like your first five books, the
yeah,
Necronomicon's usually the first one.
right. So originally, it's first mentioned in an H.P. Lovecraft horror
Mhm.
story.
Right.
And I think he brings it up a couple of times throughout his books. I'm not sure. I have his complete writings, but it'd take me forever to go through it all. I kind of use it for reference, basically. But
Yeah.
he mentions it, and so they say one doesn't exist because he made it up. But other people say there is one that exists, and there's different copies made. There's a story, and I don't know if Donald Tyson wrote this or someone wrote a thing where there is a real one, and you can
Mhm.
go read it, but you can't take it. And somehow a priest or dark priest got in this castle or whatever and swapped the book out with another book or copied it or did something and got away with it. And they say that's
Yeah.
how it got out, right? They also say
Mhm.
that they also say that like some of the spells in it, they don't
Mhm.
work because they took some of the words out and some of the
Right.
sigils out because otherwise kids would buy the Necronomicon. We got just demons running all over Earth, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't let that, you gotta learn that the hard way, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's why I think it's considered like, fictional, because what's in
Hmm.
it's kind of fake or whatever. And so, but it's
Right.
it's it's got like such a great origin,
Hmm.
story.
Yeah.
And I think that triggered a lot. You know, uh, I was looking at like um, I forget the name. We have to come back and correct this. I think Weyerhaeuser. It was that
Okay.
publishing company, right? They had all the occult, but they buy the new and used,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And I always look for an older Necronomicon on there. And they have a lot of Crowley stuff, and they have a lot of witchcraft. They got a lot of great stuff, a lot of rare stuff, really expensive stuff. So it's really cool to navigate through their stuff. But I'm always looking for a Necronomicon there. I haven't found one yet. I think people are holding on to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 Definitely. What would you say is your goal in starting this podcast? Like, what do you want people to take away from this podcast if they decide to tune in?
Um, I guess we wanted to collaborate on something together, and
Right.
so it was perfect. And then you and I have some decent knowledge on this, so it just seemed like a good idea. There's not a lot of this, like you said in the beginning. There's not a lot of this material out there,
Mhm.
and I don't know. Maybe we can save people a bunch of time. You and I have been learning stuff the hard way and trial and error, and this didn't work and that didn't work, and
Yeah.
I've been working chaos magic forever, and I think I finally figured out how to do the sigil correct and charge it because things are starting to work for me now. And so
Mhm.
I think throughout the podcast, whether we're talking about the pendulum, whether we're talking about the ends and the
Mhm.
intentions and just that kind of thing, I think you and I can just save people. If you're a serious occultist, I think you and I can they can skip the whole thing and get
Mhm.
right to it, and they don't have to go through the hard stuff like we did. I think
Right. Right. Definitely.
you
Yeah.
know it's kind of like paving the
Yeah.
way for these people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah,
For
definitely.
sure. I agree with that 100%. I feel like, when I first started, I didn't know where to look, what books to get. I was all over the board, Mesopotamian magic to demonology to like Hinduism, and you're just all over the board. You don't really know what you're looking for or what's going to work. And I feel like, each book that you buy or each religion that you read into, it's got a nugget of truth. You know, and even then, it might not, like you said, the Necronomicon, they might have, they likely took bits out of it, sigils out of it, so that way it doesn't fully work. But I feel as if, an adept, magician, sorcerer, whatever you want to call it, can work around that and make it potent and be
Yeah,
able to work it. So, yeah.
it's a really interesting theory. uh I don't know where I don't forget where I read it. So by the way, Gnashing of Teeth Podcast at gmail.com. You guys can ask Milo and I questions or even
Mhm.
help us, because here's an article I read somewhere and there's a theory and I don't know where it came from. So someone hop on there, let us know, put it in the comments, whatever. We're
Mhm.
learning too. And
Yeah.
basically it was about how people fundamentally get um um I don't want to use the word trapped, how they get like involved in whatever their religion is, right? So basically
Mhm.
it's like this. So it's kind of like The Secret, right? If you have the intention, then the universe will grant it to you, right?
Right.
And so
Mhm.
like with sigil magic, it's similar, right? You write the sigil, it goes into your unconscious, and your unconscious mind works on it with the universe or the abyss or whatever you want to call it, and then it grants it to you, right? That's why, and that's why you write. That's why writing is called spelling. You're doing spells every time you speak, every time you write. You're manifesting things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
if you're asking the universe to manifest something to you, and it happens, and you're a Christian, then you say, "Oh, Jesus did this for me, or Muhammad did this for me, or Buddha did this for me," and rightfully so, you would say, "Oh, that's my guy. That's my people, because it works. It's helping me. It's my
Right.
prayers are being answered, right?"
Mm-hmm.
But in the occult world, you're just reaching out to the abyss or a fallen angel, and that's what's helping you. So
Mm-hmm.
whether who's right or wrong, I'm not sure. Uh, to be honest, doing the occult stuff in the left hand path has yielded more results for me, that I've seen physical, tangible things happen like to me,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, that is just undeniable that it works. The other things, you know, Jesus was a cool guy. I mean, he taught the great lessons. He was a revolutionary guy. He kicked over the money changing tables because he knew a
Mm-hmm.
central bank was going to be bad. Like, the guy was ahead of his time. Great guy, right? Teaching
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
beautiful. But
Mm-hmm.
just nothing manifested for me that route. The route I'm on, and the path I'm on, things are like manifesting in my life because of that. So it's hard. That's how I think that, I don't want to say pick sides, but I think that's how people, I think that's how people get straight away, or maybe it puts them on a path that's good. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
freedom of religion, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
Whatever you like, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. I feel as if that's why a lot of people are becoming more spiritual and are interested in the occult more than ever. And it's mainly for tangible results is what people are looking for. And,
Mhm.
90% of it is likely BS.
Mhm.
But if you can find, again, going back to the nuggets of truth and find what works for you, because there's people out there that say they experience, the goddess Kali, right? I've
Right,
never met Kali. I don't know Kali. I don't know if she exists, but, hundreds of people are saying she does. So that works for them.
right. Yeah, definitely
So,
does.
you have to navigate and figure out what works for you. And the beauty about the occult is there's so many different ranges, so many different areas you can go into.
It's huge. It is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, all the different, you can do the Crowley thing. You can get
Hmm.
into Peter Carroll, and you can do the chaos magic. You can get into Andrew Chumley, which is really
Hmm.
incredible, like high level stuff. And you can get into the fun stuff like the Necronomicon, and some of the different things. They're just kind of a fantasy occult thing. You don't know if it's
Right.
real or not, or whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, Constantinos. I think he was an occultist. He wrote the Nocturnicon. Do you remember that one? I think I don't
Uh,
know. I don't know if you ever bought that one or not. I think he's into like aliens and stuff now, but he wrote
okay.
this really cool book, and he talked about um like having this like head injury,
Okay.
and then Lucifer came to him and was
Hmm.
talking to him. And the way he describes Lucifer with like these pointy features, and it's a great book, one of my favorite books. And I think where he was going was, hey, here I am injured, here I am hurt, here I am with like this, these problems, and like this person came to me, you know,
Hmm.
and no one else did, no one else, and so it's easy to be like, hey, this is working for me, so this is
Right.
the path that I'm gonna be
Yeah.
on. You know, he
Hmm.
had this really cool passage that I don't know if I mean, it's organic, right? So we're just going. So to me, it was
Hmm.
like he had this thing where in the middle of the night, he would he would go out in the backyard, and he would just like
Hmm.
feel the earth. He would just feel the ground. Okay.
Okay.
He'd close his eyes, and he would say, smell the dirt. Smell the dirt, just smell the earth and the dirt, and just believe in it and meditate on it. And then he said, there's a really small purple crackle that's in your chest, and you'll feel it. And you want to keep breathing in the earth. And then eventually, it is like this capsule that you're in this capsule of purple crackling energy.
Right.
And then he says, then you are in the abyss. And he says, there's beings just flying by you, flying by you.
Right.
And he said, in one of the passages, he said it was so awesome. He said, don't be alarmed if there's a strange being staring at you with ancient eyes, because you don't really belong there.
Right.
You're like visiting, and then some entity sees you, a demon or a fallen angel or an angel or whoever, and it's like, what is this here? And so that, they come up with, and so, believe it or not, I went outside. It was like 2 morning, and I had shorts on. This is when I lived in the desert in New Mexico. I was feeling the dirt. I was doing it. I was feeling the dirt, and I was doing it. And then I felt this little thing in my chest, and I got up and went inside because I got scared. I did. I got scared. I had to bail. I bailed on it. And then I remember thinking, I think this guy is spot on. It's a great book.
Yeah.
That was another one that really got me in. Was that good?
Yeah. Experiences tend to bring more questions than answers. And it really leads you on the path even further.
I think so. So the meeting time is winding down here on my end. We have to stop the show right now. But I think the next show we run, we should maybe talk about more of the history. There's a really cool timeline that Peter Carroll has in his book, Liber Null, which I like a lot. We can kind of talk about that. Maybe that'll get us going on episode 2. But I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody, who's watching. Again, hit us up, Gnashing of Teeth Podcast at Gmail. If you have questions or you just want to hit us up or tell us we're idiots, we're down for all that. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. 100%.
Quick shout out here. I want to thank Z Sloan. She made the logo for us. So just a quick thank you for her. And then thanks to Milo. And so, reach out to us, and we'll get back. We'll get back with you.
For sure.
All right.
100%.
All right, buddy. Good talking to you.
All right. You too.